So today I wanted to talk about common mistakes that people make when they're first learning how to scream. So let's talk a little bit about some things that you should or should not do. So hopefully you will not repeat these mistakes on your screaming journey. So some of these tips will actually apply to singers as well, but when we're learning extreme vocals or harsh vocals, we want to make sure that we know exactly what we're doing and that we take our time. Number one, the first mistake folks make often when they're trying to learn how to scream is trying to buy into some sort of speed program or some sort of sales pitch that's going to guarantee them some sort of fast results if they just learn one simple trick. Well, unfortunately, that's not realistic. So don't buy into anything that guarantees that you'll learn how to do something extreme or advanced like this in a short period of time, like a month or even shorter, because it's most likely not going to happen. My students who've taken lessons with me know that even at one lesson a week, you're only going to get 4 lessons in a month, and you're not going to have that much time to practice every week probably if you're an adult. So you have to realize that some of these advanced skills and making these sounds could take you anywhere from 6 to 8 months to a year of investing your time and practice. So I think that's mistake number 1, is expecting fast results. Number 2, there's always going to be someone who can learn this stuff really fast or who's sort of naturally good at it. But that doesn't mean that that's the case for the majority of the people. As I just laid out, number 1, that's definitely not the case for most folks. So you want to take your time gradually. Step 2 is about taking a gradual approach and not just trying to scream out of nowhere, but to slowly enter the category of extreme vocals with small sounds. This might involve sort of raspy talking at first. Hey, me, etc. But it certainly isn't just yelling out of nowhere. Take your time and watch a lot of people's tutorials. See if there are voice teachers that you relate to more, but always make sure that they start you off with some kind of step-by-step process that starts kind of small and builds over time. We shouldn't necessarily be trying to scream along with a song or just go for anything. The next mistake that new screamers often make is simply just trying to imitate people. This sometimes can work. Imitation can be a gateway when voice teachers are starting you off on a really gradual approach. For example, a lot of times I'll have folks start by imitating a little bit of distorted talking, me, etc., little caricatures like that. But that's not the same as trying to full-on imitate a screamer. Our powers of impersonation are powerful, but they're only so powerful. And I wouldn't try to full-on impersonate your favorite screamer. You need a different approach. You need a way to build that slowly. And that's more likely going to come through little tutorials or steps. Perhaps your favorite vocalist did put out a little tutorial or some advice on how to start building the sound. So I would look for things like that rather than to just straight up imitate someone, because again, that's sort of just screaming out of nowhere. And if you don't know how to make the sound, you're probably just going to shout. The fourth thing that new screamers do that they don't really think about is they don't arm themselves with any education. So a lot of times before you even start making these sounds, you really want to look into some of the research about how some of these sounds are made. What is a false chord scream? What is a fry scream? Who's doing what? What's voice with distortion? When is it used? I think if you can arm yourself a little bit with some information that's very specific about the sounds you're trying to make, that's going to help you a lot. For example, if you're trying to sound like an artist that's false chord screaming, but you've been learning fry scream, you might be very confused at the results that you've been getting. So make sure that you've done a little bit of research. There's so much free information available now on my channel, on several other folks' channels about these types of screams and the definitions. So make sure that you understand the types of screams, what they sound like, and that you're working towards the actual type of scream that you want to learn. And the fifth thing that new screamers often do wrong, that's a huge mistake, is simply trying to cheap out and learn it all yourself. We honestly can't always be self-taught vocalists. If I didn't have a lot of classical training and other training as my basis for this stuff, I couldn't have really learned or even understood a lot of the research about harsh vocals. You really need some vocal training. Nowadays, you could actually find a good teacher who does harsh vocals and understands it. Back in my day, we didn't have that option. I had to go to more classical teachers and learn other styles of singing. But I highly recommend that if you feel like you aren't really getting anywhere with video tutorials, or you're sort of feeling any sort of issues that might be hoarseness and things are not going right learning with yourself, then just humble yourself and take a lesson or two with someone who's really, really good. Because just that one lesson or two might give you enough information and understanding to make videos make more sense even. So it's worth kind of investing in a little bit of training when you're trying to do something super advanced, because most folks simply cannot do this stuff on their own. The last mistake is not stopping when you're becoming hoarse. So we shouldn't actually be injuring ourselves or becoming hoarse when we're making the correct sound. If anything you're doing while you're trying to teach yourself how to scream is causing hoarseness or pain or strain, the biggest mistake you can make is not stopping and not trying to see a vocal coach to try to adjust that, because we definitely do not want to continue with anything that's causing us pain or hoarseness under any circumstances. You'll just cause permanent injury. So that's one of the biggest mistakes you can make, is sort of no pain, no gain and powering through it. That rule does not apply to singing. If you have pain, you're going to lose gains. So please don't continue. That philosophy does not apply to singing and screaming, and we do not need to experience pain or hoarseness to be a good singer or screamer. So please do not do any of that. Please stop when you feel those things and look for professional advice and help at that point to take you to the next level. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for all the subs and everything. I really appreciate it. Let me know who you want to see me do a reaction video to next. I need some more suggestions. So give me some suggestions in the comments. It'd be great to hear what you want to see me talk about next, or whose vocals you want me to explain. So I hope these tutorials have been helping you in the meantime. Don't forget, I've got a lot of playlists right here on YouTube that can get you started with many of these things. Thanks a lot, everybody, and I hope you have a great day. Bye. Hey, everybody, Mary Z back once again with Voice Hacks. I wanted today to tackle in this tutorial a voice myth about screaming. Today, I'm going to answer the question of, if you don't cool down your voice after you do any sort of distorted singing or screaming, that it will permanently stay that way. Is it fact or fiction? Today, I'm going to tell you the truth in my latest tutorial. I've seen a few different videos and a few different things going around saying that if you stop screaming, or if you stop doing distorted singing or something like that, that you absolutely need to cool your voice down with some clean singing in order to prevent damage or to prevent some kind of permanent raspiness or permanent distorted state in your voice. I've even literally heard people claim that it will stay that way if you don't do that your voice will somehow magically stay distorted if you don't cool it down. And you can see sort of by the sarcastic, dramatic tone that I'm using that I actually don't think this is true at all. So if you've watched my other videos, especially my distortion explanation videos, you already know that most of our distorted sounds do not actually come from our actual vocal cords or vocal folds. Folds or cords are interchangeable words, folks, in case you're kind of wondering. In the case of distorted vocals, whether it's singing with distortion, speaking with distortion, or full distortion screams like fry screaming or false chord screaming, we need to be aware that the distorted part of the sound is coming from the flapping around or shaking around of tissues that are creating white noise. Most distorted sounds are not coming from something happening in your vocal cords, and they certainly shouldn't leave permanent damage to the vocal cords in any regard once we're finished making them. And this is why we want to make sure that we learn how to make the correct sounds, where the tissues in our false cords, our soft palate, our uvula, and our sinuses are rattling around and shaking to create a majority of the distortion. The best thing you can do after you're done screaming and shaking around a lot of those tissues and making a lot of distorted noises, hey, is to actually just stop. Realize that if you're doing a sort of cool down after an aggressive vocal session, you're actually just singing more and you should be resting your voice. There's absolutely nothing wrong with stopping and not talking and going into a vocal rest state as soon as you're done with your stage set or whatever sort of distorted thing you've been doing. A cool down might psychosomatically make you feel a little bit better. I'm always in favor of anything that makes someone feel a little bit more psychologically relaxed when they're vocalizing. If for you it provides a relaxation or a sort of a swelling check, you can always check if you're going hoarse by doing sort of a cool down and kind of doing some falsetto hums. He, she, these kind of things. When you do that, you can check and see if you're going hoarse, but you really don't need to. If you're doing correct screams, we shouldn't be going hoarse. And if we are using the correct tissues, it shouldn't be affecting our vocal folds. In fry screaming, we do push air between our closed vocal cords, kind of making the vocal cords create a little bit of white noise in the sound like this, like a bit. If my lips were vocal cords, you get the idea. But that is only because our tissues are soft and they're being pressed together and we're pushing air through it. That's why my lips make a good demonstration there. It's pretty much what it looks like. Just to be clear, most of our fry screaming distortion is still coming from our soft palate and the uvula and other tissues flapping around. Some of it is coming from that white noise of air going between those soft cords. But even that should not permanently in any way change the shape or condition of your vocal cords. Your vocal cords, when they're healthy, are smooth along the surface, and you should be able to return from aggressive, harsh vocals into pure, clean singing with ease if you're good at making both sounds and you have some experience. I used to do this all the time in my bands, go right into opera singing after screaming. I've done all kinds of crazy things like that. Because the surface of our cords isn't changing or getting damaged or being affected by a proper scream, once the tissues are done shaking around, if we're not engaging them, our voice should simply return to normal, because if you're not shaking around the tissues, it's not going to be distorted. We definitely don't want distortion to come from our vocal folds themselves. It's only going to come from blowing air past them or through them or onto other tissues. And once that's done, it's done. It shouldn't leave you with any continuing rasp or distortion. If for some reason your actual voice, like your speaking voice, becomes uncontrollably raspy, like you're always raspy all the time, that's a sign of vocal damage or vocal strength issues, where maybe your cords are not touching the way that they should, or there's an obstruction like a polyp or a callus on the surface of our cords preventing them from touching. And that would give us a slightly different sound than raspy singing or screaming. It's kind of this husky, like, hey, like, kind of like this a little bit, permanent raspiness. What I'm actually doing there when I'm imitating that sound is holding my cords apart a little bit. And it's not very comfortable. I don't recommend doing that. But what I'm saying is, if you have some kind of permanent raspy thing going on, it's not because you were screaming. Only if you were screaming incorrectly. It's from something else happening. We can get polyps and calluses and damage from a variety of reasons. We can get vocal cord weakness from a variety of reasons. Something like being sick could give us, even if we've never sang a distorted note in our life. So we just need to be careful to understand these sounds clearly and where they're coming from. So what I say is, don't worry about a cool down. Don't panic or freak out if you haven't been cooling down. Your voice will be fine as long as you're making the correct screams to begin with. You have to be making the correct sound. That is the big caveat here. If you're making wrong sounds, you might be yelling, and then you might actually cause vocal damage, in which case a cool down still won't help you either. It's not going to change the swelling you just inflicted on your vocal cords by doing the wrong sound. In the case of hoarseness, I would recommend that you actually don't cool down at all, that you just stop immediately and you just rest your voice. Silence is the best cool down. Rest your voice for at least 20 minutes before you go back out and speak to the audience, maybe if you're a touring musician, something like that. Cool downs are going to be continuing to phonate sounds, continuing to use your cords, continuing to use your muscles, and extending the time in which you're fatiguing everything. And so I just really don't think they're necessary. Just know if you have been doing correct screams, if you don't cool down, you will not end up permanently raspy. I have not ever done done cooldowns since I've done screams the entire time I've been around. I've never had a polyp, a nodule, any sort of vocal damage, and you can hear that I have a nice, smooth speaking voice with no permanent raspiness. So if I'm not a good guinea pig, there's a lot of other folks out there who also have never cooled down and don't experience permanent raspiness, as long as you're making the correct screams to begin with. One of the goals of my channel, guys, is to provide clear instruction and actually tell you what's actually going on in a direct, non-abstract way to ease your fears, so that you go into these things armed and educated, and that you're not afraid of making certain sounds when they're correct. If you ever experience hoarseness or like stabbing or aching pains, then that's definitely time to stop what you're doing and learn how to make the sound more correctly. That's super important. Okay, everybody? If you need lessons and you're curious on how to do these techniques correctly, I've got my Screamer series playlist, but you can always email me at voicehacks@gmail.com. I give Skype lessons to students all over the world every week. Thanks, guys, and I'll see you soon. Hey everybody, Mary Z here, back once again with Voice Hacks by Mary Z. Today I'm doing something totally different that I actually haven't done before, but a lot of you have been requesting these style of videos. So in this video, I'm going to take a look at the 3 Nightwish singers. Nightwish is a European band that has had 3 different singers, all sopranos, but different singing styles and totally different color voices. So a lot of you folks out there have been asking me about color and what's the difference between the color of people's voices. So I want to deliver that information for you today. So the other reason a lot of you have asked me to do react style videos is to get through some of the clickbait that's out there. The people who don't really give you an analysis and explain the technique. Well, as you know, I'm definitely going to deliver that information. So today's react video should be extra detailed. If you're not already in our Facebook group, join us in the Voice Hacks Singer Sanctuary on Facebook and check us out there. I often poll people there and ask what they want to see. Please also leave your comments in the YouTube comments about what you want to see. So the first thing we're going to talk about is we've had 3 different singers in Nightwish. The first one was Tarja Turunen. The second one was Annette Olsen. And the third one, current singer, is Floor Jansen. So these are all European vocalists, all from different places, who have fronted the band Nightwish, and we're going to compare them all singing the same song in the same key, and we're going to talk about what the differences are between them, and I'll give you my reaction to it. So first we're going to start with Tarja, who is definitely a purely operatic singer. So I really want to emphasize that her singing style is really pretty much exactly the same as it would be in classical singing when she goes and sings an opera song. So we're going to take a look at this song Nemo here, and we're going to start with Tarja. Okay, so that's a little clip of Tarja right there. And what Tarja does is she sings all classical all the time. She has the advantage on a lot of these older Nightwish songs because they are written to her capabilities, maybe not necessarily to the others. Even though they're all sopranos, they have different color voices and different singing styles. So Tarja, we can note, is doing classical singing style, and she has the darkest color voice out of all 3 of the singers. And that means not her vocal range, not what notes she can sing, but the actual sound of her voice. Bright voices will be the next one we'll look at. So you'll be able to compare her to Annette, and you'll see kind of the difference between dark and bright. But also, she's singing in a completely operatic singing style, which is generally like a vertical placement. It's very wide, and it doesn't have any of the epiglottal twang that we see in belting. So it doesn't have the brassiness. So we're hearing like, oh, how I wish pitch, very like wide, lots of vibrato. And as a result, this is a very delicate song that's easy for her to move around in because she's not belting. So we're not like getting to any breaking points here. She's staying in the same tone placement, the same style throughout her range. And so we're getting a pretty comprehensive, very nice, easy flow to all of her singing there. So that's a dark voice in an operatic style. Let's take a look at their second singer, where they went completely different. When they hired Annette Olson, they hired a very bright voice person who is a belter. And note, this song is in the same key as the one we just listened to. They never changed the key for the singer. They've always just hired sopranos. So we're going to talk about how Annette sounds and how it sounds a little bit different here. Let's take a look at her.
This is me for forever, one without a name. This life's the last endeavor to find the missing line. Oh, how I wish for surrender. All I wish is to dream again. My loving heart lost in the dark. For hope I gave my everything.
Okay, so we're going to take a look at that. Totally different sound there, right? Extremely bright, extremely brassy. What is the difference? Well, one thing is Annette, even if she were a classical singer like Tarja, just has a bright voice across the board. There's no question about it. We can hear, and what's the difference between bright and dark? Well, you can hear that Annette's color isn't quite as warm, if you will. It's not as soft or as round. Part of that is her singing style. She's belting, not singing classical. And part of it is just the natural timbre or color of her voice. So it would be kind of bright even if she were singing in the classical style. So when Annette is singing, she's fully belting, which is like a forward placement. So if you don't know how to belt or how to rock sing, or that's kind of confusing, watch the video I have here on the Voicehacks channel on YouTube about tone placement. And I explain that a little bit. But it's using our mind to control the mechanical actions of the voice. When someone's singing with a forward placement, they're imagining their sound going forward, similar to when we speak. And what happens is our epiglottis folds over about halfway or part way, and we get kind of a megaphone shape to it. And that gives us a much brassier, louder tone. In some vocal programs, it is referred to as twang, but we don't mean it in the country music sense. We mean it in the sense of its the epiglottis is kind of bent in this position here. So when she's doing it, we're getting a much brassier timbre up on those high notes. And because she's a soprano, she's able to maintain her belting placement very high. Most people have to break from their belt register after about the top of their 2 octaves. So it also gives it the illusion that it's higher than it is. So it kind of makes it sound a little more intense, whereas Tarja's style makes it sound a bit more delicate. So, and you can also tell that it's a little bit easier to sing the low notes when we're belting. If you notice, Tarja's low notes were not quite as strong. It's difficult for a soprano to sing low, period. But when we're belting, it's a little bit easier. So let's now take a look at Floor, who's the third and current singer of this band, and see how hers sounds. Here we go. Okay, so that's Floor Jansen, and a lot of people don't realize Floor was a really well-known singer before Nightwish, and probably one of the best singers in metal, in my opinion. She used to play with this band called After Forever, and I got to open for them back in the day and stuff, and she's amazing. So what we want to look at Floor, though, we kind of hear something in between. And in between, in a lot of ways, We have in between in color. So it is neither bright nor dark. And we have in between in style. We're not fully operatic and we're not always belting. So what's happening here? Floor has like a medium colored soprano voice. You can hear that. It has a little bit of warmth to it and a little bit of that soprano brightness, but it's not quite as dark as Tarja's voice. In the classical world, they actually have a much more detailed system called the Fach system. It's a method of classifying people by their vocal color, not just their vocal range. So in the classical world, I'm not exactly sure what Fach each one of these people would fall into, because we'd probably have to listen to them sing more classical repertoire. But we'll just regard Flora as having sort of a medium color voice. Now, the other thing that Flora is doing is she belts and mixes a lot. She will go full opera at times. Like if you check out her performance of Ghost Love Score, definitely we're going to hear all 3 tone placements throughout that song. But in this song, we hear her doing belting a little bit and then mixing. There's 2 kinds of mixing that we can do. One is just pure mixed voice where we send our sound here. Oh, how I wish, something like that. And you can tell that Flora's isn't quite that mixed. But there's also an upper belting kind of placement, which some vocal programs call overdrive. We kind of send it through here, the tip of the nose. Oh, how I wish. We get kind of a blend. I had to change the note and do it a little lower because I am not a soprano, as you can probably tell from my low speaking voice. So where we get a little bit of a mix added to our belt a bit. It actually causes the vocal fold mass to widen a bit. So, and Flora is very good at transitioning from belting to mix in a variety of levels throughout her performance. And that is ultimately what makes her kind of a very stable and flexible singer for Nightwish, who has had such a variety of people. So she's not, whereas we see Annette and Tarja, they're both wonderful singers, but they stick with their placement and they don't really deviate too much from it. So that was my react video on the 3 Nightwish singers. So remember, they're all sopranos. They all have the same note range, but they're just using their voice differently. And the shape of their face and the shape of their body gives it a different color or timbre. So that's how we can tell the difference, even if they're singing in the same key. So let me know who you want me to react to next. I'm probably going to do some screamers next. So I hope you'll check out my next couple of react videos. Ask your questions in the YouTube comments. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you soon. Thanks.